Barrage. A hush falls over a battlefield that no longer looks like any one we have known. Above scarred hills and the ruins of once quiet towns, a new kind of thunder has become ordinary. The whine of propellers, the blink of navigation lights, the sudden engineered descent of small metal boxes that explode on contact. Tonight, those drones were the story. Overnight, fighters identifying themselves as Hezbollah said they carried out a large-scale attack on Israeli forces, assembled at a forward position known locally as Nina al-Jamal. The group claimed the operation involved multiple attack drones and, in its statement, boasted what it called a confirmed hit. The words were brief, stark, and typical of the terse messages now circulating from both sides, precise, public, and designed to shape a narrative even as the smoke has yet to clear. This was not presented as an isolated strike. Hezbollah said it had conducted 6 separate operations against Israeli forces earlier this week, including the downing of an Israeli Hermes 900 drone over an area referred to in some accounts as Kontara, and what the group described as a direct strike on an Israeli tank, a strike reported in some local dispatches as having used an explosive drone. Whether the tank was disabled, damaged or destroyed, and what the human toll might have been, remains contested. What is clear is the message: drones have moved from surveillance platforms into a central offensive role on the northern front. Israeli military spokespeople and independent observers alike are grappling with that evolution. Recent press accounts describe the drones Hezbollah is employing as what one outlet called a significant and complex threat, language that captures both the sophistication of the systems being deployed and the operational dilemma they create. Small, difficult to detect, and relatively cheap, these drones can be launched in numbers and in bursts, saturating defenses and forcing soldiers to choose between the NDB, safety of cover, and the duty to retrieve and treat the wounded. The new phase of fighting has been punctuated on the ground by accusations, images, and the release of footage that together form a war of evidence. The Israel Defense Forces released footage this week purporting to show the discovery and destruction of 2 major underground tunnels near a town variously referred to in reports, located roughly 10 kilometers from Israel's northern communities. The military said the tunnels were constructed over the course of about a decade and alleged they had been financed by Iran. It presented the images as part of a broader effort to dismantle what it described as Hezbollah's terror infrastructure. Soldiers shown clearing passages and uncovering rooms, water tanks and sleeping quarters were framed as proof of a plan for prolonged combat inside Lebanon. As is often the pattern, the military statements were blunt and declarative. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressing the developments was unambiguous in tone and scope. He said, "Earlier today, we destroyed a massive Hezbollah terror tunnel. We are now systematically dismantling their entire terror infrastructure. We are killing dozens upon dozens of their terrorists, and we are just getting started. We are operating within the security zones south of the Litani, north of the Litani, in the B and in northern Lebanon. And a few weeks ago, I issued a directive for a special project to eliminate the drone threat. It will take time, but we will blow that up too." Those words reflect a strategy that mixes kinetic operations, raids, tunnel demolition, targeted strikes, with an explicit vow to suppress the new aerial threat. But for residents on both sides of the border, the stakes are painfully real, immediate, and human. In southern Lebanon, images and reports this week described entire buildings reduced to rubble after Israeli strikes. In one town, emergency workers and civilians sifted through debris in Hech. Hopes of finding survivors. Lebanese media reported that 5 members of the same family were killed overnight when a residential building in the Al-Jabal neighborhood was struck. Scenes of blankets stretched over bodies, of rescue teams working through the hours before dawn, have pushed the costs of escalation into private-wrenching detail. At the same time, Hezbollah has been public about its willingness to strike well beyond rural fronts. The group claimed a guided missile strike this week that it said hit Israeli troops and vehicles in occupied southern Lebanon. The same day, residents in northern Israel heard missile and drone sirens as authorities reported a suspected drone incursion over the western Galilee. The military later said it lost contact with a suspicious aerial target, suggesting it had likely crashed in the area. In another town, a rocket warning siren was sounded when authorities feared falling fragments following an interception attempt. In some places, minutes later, yet more sirens were classified as false alarms, a detail that underscores the chaos of detection and the anxious rhythm of people living under it. Across a long, fraught frontier, both sides have intensified pressure in probing attacks and counterattacks. Lebanese state outlets and Hezbollah-affiliated channels described a strike on a cluster of Israeli vehicles and soldiers at Tel Nahas on the outskirts of Kafr, saying a guided missile had scored a direct hit. Israeli accounts, meanwhile, reported the seizure of arms and combat gear in a raid in southern Lebanon, including the dramatic claim that a weapons cache had been discovered hidden inside what was described as a child's bedroom. The military listed explosives, rifles, grenades, RPG launchers, machine guns and munitions among the materials recovered, and said the site was one of several illustrating attempts to conceal military supplies within civilian infrastructure. Perhaps the most harrowing footage to circle. 8 this week captured an explosive drone diving toward Israeli troops as they tried to evacuate their wounded. The incident, filmed in the village identified in local reporting as Taiba in occupied southern Lebanon, happened in a few chaotic seconds. A tank from the Golani Brigade's 12th Battalion reportedly broke down inside the village as soldiers tended to the disabled vehicle and to the injured. One drone struck nearby, causing initial casualties. In those violent minutes, evacuation teams, including a helicopter, attempting to airlift the wounded, moved in and more drones were launched toward the site. The video shows panic and precision in equal measure. Soldiers can be seen opening fire at the incoming craft. The drone plummets and detonates in a fiery blast feet from the rescue teams. The Israeli military said 1 soldier was killed in the strike and 6 others were wounded, 4 of them seriously. Accounts say the proximity of the explosions and the presence of additional unneutralized drones made the rescue and medical evacuation operations exceedingly dangerous, turning what should have been a moment of care into another front of combat. For the commanders on both sides, drones have introduced new trade-offs. They allow strikes to be delivered from afar, reducing exposure of human pilots and costly aircraft. They allow groups like Hezbollah to project power without requiring the kind of heavy armor or airlift assets that once defined conventional assaults or traditional defenses. Intercepting a small, low-flying, low-signature drone is different from shooting down a jet or a long-range missile. For soldiers on the ground, the calculus between retrieving a comrade and taking cover is now complicated by airborne, low-cost, near-immediate threats that can be launched in waves. What we are seeing, in other words, is a battlefield adapting faster than either side's doctrine can fully absorb. The IDF has publicly said it is working on specialized projects to counter the drone threat. Hezbollah's media output suggests it has scaled a campaign that blends guided missiles with explosive drones and attempts to use tunnel networks and hidden caches to sustain operations. Civilians, whether in border towns in northern Israel or in southern Lebanese communities, find themselves trapped between asymmetric tactics and defensive measures that can hardly guarantee their safety. All of this is occurring while a ceasefire, fragile wherever it has been attempted, is routinely tested. Political leaders and military commanders trade statements that alternately warn, justify, and claim success. Scenes of destruction on Lebanese streets are counterpointed by footage released by the Israeli military showing tunnels and weapons stockpiles. Each side offers imagery intended to prove the legitimacy of its actions and the peril posed by the other. To those watching from afar, the alternating images of rubble, of tunnels, of drones exploding. NG in the air suggests a conflict that is increasingly defined by new technologies, old grievances, and a high human toll. Families pay the price. A reported airstrike in a Lebanese town that killed 5 members of a single family is not an abstract statistic. It is a set of lives ended, of homes demolished, of children and elders gone. On the other side, soldiers killed or seriously wounded under the blades of small rotary drones leave units shaken, medics grieving, and comrades forced to reconcile the dangers of rescue with the imperative to save lives. For first responders, the arrival of more drones and the inability to guarantee an area is secure during a medevac turns acts of compassion into tactical gambles. The spread of these technologies raises hard questions about escalation and control. When a weapon can be built and launched with a fraction of the cost of a guided missile or a fighter jet, the threshold for use can be lower, and the incentives to employ surrogates and standoff tactics can rise. That in turn matters in a theatre where miscalculation is never far from catastrophe. One wayward drone, one misread intention, one failure to intercept. Any of these can create cascading consequences. For now, both militaries appear to be adjusting on the fly. The Israeli Prime Minister's vow to dismantle what he termed a terror infrastructure and to undertake a special project aimed at eliminating the drone threat signals a sustained strategic focus on the problem. Hezbollah's continued broadcasts of strikes and its claims of successful operations serve a different purpose. They are as much psychological operations as they are battlefield reports designed to shore up domestic support and to warn adversaries that the group's capabilities are changing. As the conflict evolves, the line between battlefield and neighborhood continues to blur. That is the grim reality residents face on both sides, a proximity in geography matched now by a proximity in Dan. Jer, the mechanics of warfare, reconnaissance, movement, evacuation, have been reshaped by devices that can appear over rooftops without warning, strike at speed, then vanish into the night. This is not the distant thunder of artillery alone, nor the high arc of ballistic missiles. It is low, fast, and lethal in ways that complicate the oldest duties of soldiers and the most urgent instincts of neighbors trying to protect one another. What remains constant, even as weapons change, is the human consequence. The bodies pulled from rubble, the soldiers carried away on stretchers, the families of the dead and wounded, the communities huddled in shelters. Those images travel across the battlefield of modern media as quickly as drones cross borders. They become the enduring record of what a conflict produces when new tools meet old fault lines. Tonight, the drone swarms will likely be counted, analysed and debated by military planners and politicians. Commanders will consider new tactics, analysts will pass footage for technical signatures, and diplomats will weigh whether and how to press for restraint. On the ground, border communities will brace for the next siren, the next alert, the next fight of something small and deadly overhead. And those who care for the wounded will prepare for the grim certainty that the next call to move will come under conditions that blur the line between rescue and risk. In the months ahead, the question will be whether countermeasures can keep pace, whether defences can be fielded, tactics adapted and civilian protections strengthened quickly enough to blunt a tool that has already reshaped combat in real time. Until that happens, whine of propellers will remain the soundtrack to a conflict that has entered an unsettling new phase, where the front line is not only where soldiers stand, but the space between buildings, the rooftop where families sleep, and the narrow corridors used by those trying to flee. For now, the camera. As the statements and the footage continue to tell a story of a war whose form is shifting, the faces behind the words, the wounded, the dead, the commanders, and the civilians are the true measure of what is at stake. Their stories will continue to emerge as events unfold, as investigations proceed, and as each side seeks to explain, justify, and prevail in a conflict increasingly defined by machines that fly low, hit hard, and change everything about how war is waged.